Welcome everyone. We're excited to have you joining us for our next process session. This one's called Build Better Reporting, the 5 Steps to Data Visual Happiness. For this session, we've got Robert Jan Barmentlow. He's a Senior Platform Product Manager for Now Platform Analytics at ServiceNow. And he's been with ServiceNow for just a little over 8 years now, in a variety of different roles, mostly relating to analytics and reporting. Robert's current focus is making workflow for internal ServiceNow teams using Now Platform's intelligence capabilities and performance analytics. With that, I'll turn it over to Robert Jan.
So first of all, big thanks for allowing me to speak, and of course appreciate each of you for choosing this session over all the other outstanding content that's there. I looked through the agenda. I was actually in some other sessions before, and I think it's great. There's amazing content over there. So thanks for choosing this one. I'll try to make it an enjoyable experience. As was mentioned, I am part of the ServiceNow product management team, specifically focused on what we call platform analytics. Platform analytics includes the things like you would know as our in-platform reporting, performance analytics, dashboards, but also the embedded integrated analytics that you see as part of maybe other UIs like workspaces, and also including the user experience analytics, which is the in-platform usage analytics you can use to better measure what your users are doing, how your users are actually using the platform in the instance. Through the journey of my let's say 4 or 5 years being really involved in building the product, I was involved in the delivery of features like the report designer that you might know from the platform. We worked on many charts like the new pivot table, the calendar, the geographical map. I worked on multiple data sets, reporting drill downs, and indeed the last few years more working on the more enablement and adoption side of the product. So really make sure that we support basically anything that we're building in a better way, that people are just better adopting it and taking the full value out of it. Also from that, actually, I created this what I tend to call these 5 steps of data visual happiness. The goal there is to really try to make more engaging, better digestible, more insightful data visual stories that really bring the consumers of your analytics into the into better insights that they see, and of course then also better decision making and taking actions on top of the data. I always think having the tools is one, like you could use reporting within the platform. You can use the amazing VividCharts solution on top of the platform data. But in the end, that's just a tool. There are other key guidelines and best practices that you as a builder of data visuals should apply to really make sure that something becomes more meaningful and more actionable. So this session is less about those tools, but it is more about those actual simple steps that you can follow and best practices that you can apply to really start doing some data visual storytelling. So that for my intro. Now we're going to talk about the slides. But before I actually go in, I want to talk about Jon Snow. And I might hear you think, Jon Snow, isn't that the one from Game of Thrones? He was also named Jon Snow, but I actually don't mean that one. I actually mean this one. And what I'll do is I'll take you back to London, 1854. And the map that you're looking at here on the right is actually London city center. And this is actually not so much a happy story, as this was a time when there was a huge cholera outbreak back in 1854. And what Dr. Jon Snow here on the left did was he was a leader in the development of medical hygiene at that time. And he was working on solving that outbreak, of course. And he used this map to then illustrate the concentration of all the cases that he found. And he used dots and to place those dots on a map. And fortunately, he made that connection with the quality of the water that people were getting from the public water pumps. And you can see here on this map, he actually plotted the cases and the water pumps, and all became these data points on a map. And with that, he was actually turning, of course, data into information. So he had the data points, he had the cases, he had the water pumps, he was showing it within this map, and it suddenly became information. And as he was doing this, he actually got that insight that people were specifically getting sick around this one water pump here in the center. So there was a high concentration of cases there. There's this one public water pump there. So from that, he got the insight and basically brought him from just having data into information, into an insight. Now, not only that insight and the actions that they took upon that insight that made that outbreak stop, but this visual that you're looking at here appears to be also, or is supposedly also, the first known data visualization known in history. And then fast forward to the present, it would probably look a little bit more like this. So still we see Jon Snow, we see the map of London, but now we have all these other capabilities around the data that we show, around the context of data that we want to show together with the data in a data visualization, interactivity that you can do, annotations that you can apply. All those things, they allow us to do this amazing data visual storytelling. And really, this example that you're looking at here is really showing the power of turning data into information, into meaningful insights. Now, let's start with identifying why it is so hard to actually build this good, meaningful data visual story. And there are these problems these problems and challenges that prevent us from creating good data visual experiences, and they result in the fact that we often fail to reach our goal of making a certain point and deliver that insight that we want to deliver. If we fail to reach that goal, it's not only we have the risk that the end users consuming the data visualizations, the charts, the analytics charts or reports that they might not understand, maybe might do understand something, but it's actually not the point that you as the builder were trying to make. So first, what I think is a challenge and what is a problem, report building or data visualization building, I think it can almost be considered a craft. You need this mix of knowledge, maybe on specific subject matter expertise, of course, on the topic. You need maybe something on the data model. And only if you have access to all that knowledge, it will actually enable you to build something good. Then the second one is often people are also not aware of the technical capabilities to tell that story. So they do not have enough knowledge of the tool and how to use what is the latest available, the what's in my toolbox to create some good data stories with. And then there's the third one, the approach. And the approach is where I believe that we often start wrong, or we ignore these crucial steps. And in the following presentation, I will actually touch upon all these areas, but most of my focus will actually go into this last point, into the approach, because I think that those 5 steps will actually give you some guidance to do it the right way. If you hear me talk about the analytics UIs that we build or that we allow our customers to build, you hear me often refer to it as a data visual display. And the reason for that is that these best practices we're taking, that we're talking about here today, don't just apply to a dashboard or a single report, but it's the UI that you're building where you are integrating analytics and data visuals like analytics charts to provide these insights. Maybe it's some native mobile chart that you are consuming, or maybe it's some integrated analytics chart that is part of a workflow experience in ServiceNow, or maybe it's some chart storytelling that you do within slides, as you can do with the cool VividCharts function, to really create and present your stories. Now today I will be using the dashboards as the main example of a visual display, but I would say always remember that this basically applies to anything that you build. So whether it's analytics as part of a workflow experience or that slide deck or that dashboard, I believe your goal should always be to really enable your largest group of end users to have the greatest degree of understanding with the least amount of effort. And just to be sure, by this, we mean the least amount of effort for the end user to consume. Because I believe that as the visual display builder, the one that builds the report or the one that builds the dashboard, you do have to make this huge effort to create the best experience for your users. And that is exactly what we're doing with those 5 steps. If we look specifically at the definition of a dashboard, this definition says a dashboard is a visual display of the most important information needed to achieve one or more objectives, consolidated and arranged on a single screen so the information can be monitored at a glance. Why I think this is such a good explanation is because it highlights 2 important aspects. One, you are building a visual display with the most important information, but also that visual display should have this distinct purpose or value. And one of the most common mistakes that people make when building dashboards is that just sort of almost natural desire to just start with something that looks good, that's something that fills up a space, that we immediately think, let's bring charts in, let's bring color in, and then let's later try to put that functionality on top. But you have to know that that is impossible and will actually lead into a storytelling disaster. It might be a pretty disaster, but it's still a storytelling disaster. So those 5 steps, as listed out here, number 1, it's just a question, who's your audience? Number 2, what is the required type? Number 3, what is the data context? Number 4, organize, how to organize your visual display. And then number 5, to style. And I think it's pretty simple. I just made a few rules on it. I said, you do them all, and you do them in this sequential order from 1 all the way into 5, and you should do them all with the effort that they require. So you don't overdo one and then cut short or another one. What I think in practice, what we in practice often see going wrong is basically this one, where people start to build this visual display correctly, and then they start with identifying the audience and their needs, and they select the type of visual display that they need. They select the right data and the granularity of the data, and then immediately try to plot all that information on a dashboard. And it often results, so they skip the organize and the style part, and it often results in the fact that consumers do not understand it. It doesn't digest well. It might have all the data, but it's just presented as this huge data overload. So if there's no story to take from the whole data visual display, like the dashboard, it just takes too much time to transform that data into information. And you should also not forget that when reading a visualization like a report or a dashboard, your end user, your reader, has this limited amount of brain power that they can actually dedicate to the problem. And if most of that brain power is actually already needed to decode what is actually happening on the screen, there's only this small set of limited brain power left to actually understand the message. Now, another example that I often see, which is also wrong, is this one. And this is where folks usually immediately start to paint, to start going, you have this empty white canvas and you immediately start adding charts and you start adding color. This used to be me. If I would have this empty dashboard, I would immediately start filling it up with all these charts and everything, because you want to build something. You want to build something that looks nice, that looks engaging. Now, in this case, this might actually turn out to be this pretty good looking dashboard. It's beautifully styled. It's nicely constructed. It has all those best practices that I will talk about. It has all of those applied. But now imagine that data and the purpose and the audience it's actually intended to is wrong here. So someone would actually visit this dashboard, they would look at it once, and they will probably never visit it again. In that case, you really missed your opportunity. And as tempting that this might be for the eye, if there's no functional meaning for that end user underneath, you are not meeting your goals. And remember, again, it's very hard, if not impossible, to later put functionality on top. This could be that pretty disaster that I was talking about. So let's dive a little bit more into detail of all of them. And let's start with number one, the audience. In most cases, you as the builder, you're building something not for yourself, but you're building something for someone else, for your users. So you need to build something, of course, that's meaningful, and it should be focused around meeting your end users' needs. So the first step here is basically to identify who is this for? And then don't make the mistake of approaching it as what is it that I would like to say, but completely approach it from their point of view. What does my audience need? So you really have to do the research of your audience and their needs. And the way how you do that is basically just talk with them, do that analysis, do that finding those requirements, finding those needs, ask questions like, what type of persona am I dealing with? What are their objectives? What is their goal, their purpose? How will they actually consume? Is this maybe on a small device? Is this maybe on a big TV screen that you sometimes see in those maybe service centers? How much time will they actually take for consumption? And what is their level of understanding? Maybe on the topic, on the data underneath. What is the journey that they were in? For example, where did they come from? Why did they come from there? What are their generic needs and motivations? And then finally, most likely, what will their next action be? Like where will they go from this consuming this information that they just did? So all that information is important to really understand how your audience will actually consume the information and what they'll do with it. For data information to become meaningful, I always think that you need, of course, context. Like you need with analytics to become really meaningful and insightful, you need the context. And when you think about this in this step number one for the audience, you can already realize that all these different types of audience, for example, these 4 different types of personas that we have here on the slide, they will look differently at your data. So every role within your audience has, of course, different responsibilities, which come with different business goals. And every role will have different questions that will help them to meet those objectives, to get to those goals. But they all, of course, have the same shared data. They just look at it from different angles. So this is why you have to sit with your audience and ask them all those questions and try to understand what exactly that angle is for them to really be able to build this right dashboard for them. And you'll find out for these 4 personas, it will most likely result in 4 completely different dashboards with other layout, with other metrics, with other KPIs, with basically everything, just to make it meaningful for them. So again, as a summary of this first step, the approach is you just sit down with your users, you sit down with those consumers, your audience, and you have to investigate their state, their needs, their objectives, their purpose. What is the point that they need? What triggers them to do a certain business decision and then take an action? Try to really use empathy to put yourself in their world and then figure out what those needs are. This brings us to number 2, which is the type. And as we've done it in this order, and as we've done, we've already identified the audience and exactly their needs. So now we know that persona audience, and we have the answer to all those questions around their purpose and their need. It's really time to define the type of visual display that you actually want to build, the type of dashboard that you want to build, that really connects with that need and the point that you want to make. But for that, you need to understand what the different types out there can actually bring. And you have to be aware that this step is super important. This one really dictates a lot about the best consumption structure that we'll look at later. And at all these next steps, you will define the data and the chart types and the layout and the interactivity and all the possible actions. And all those basically relate to this step. So therefore, we do it in this order, and therefore after we know who we're building it for, we're actually identifying the type. Now, looking at dashboards as an example, a high level, we can roughly divide them into these 4 types. I think there are more. I think there are like 6 to 10 actually, but mostly you will actually see your use cases around these 4 types. And these 4 types being in the upper left, strategic, in the upper right, tactical, and then in the second row being analytical and operational. And understand that all these types, they actually come with their own character, with their own characteristics, meaning this is important as it sets the skeleton for your data and for your structure. So for example, a strategic dashboard, it will actually be focused on presenting that high level overview. It's often very KPI driven. It's very rich on metrics. It's the current state, the now in relation to targets. And there you often see a lot of trend information as well. And then in the tactical display, it's usually very informative. It's driven to this direct decision making. There's also in this one often a lot of information at a single glance, but usually even more information behind certain interactivity, like filters that you do, or maybe a drill down or a click through on certain charts, and it brings you to another UI or brings you to immediately to the data. The analytical ones, they often focus on a bit longer time periods. They're of course very performance driven, showing trends and all that in analytics information. They're often very also data centric. So they're often the entry point for further data exploration. And then finally, there's operational, and that has the needs around being very time sensitive, when there's often immediate action required. So key elements here really being things like real time. It needs to be clean and simple, a lot of actionability, and often also a single screen. This is also that example of the service center TV screen that you might see, the dashboard that's hanging over there. Now, all those types basically follow this fixed set of characteristics that you can apply, and these will really be that blueprint of the metrics, of the reports, the data visualization, the analytics charts, the KPIs that you will put in based on the subject. Step 3, the data. So the data is of course what it supports, what supports everything. And data in general, we have of course an abundance of. There's so much data. So for this one, it is crucial that you've identified, of course, your audience, what you did in step 1, to really understand the subject matter needs that they might have. Because only when you know the questions in your users' heads, you will actually know if you have the right data to answer those. So selecting the right data and the granularity of the data is key here. And without that, it's probably impossible to make the information that you have really useful. Also for this one, always be aware for I would say the almost classic pitfall where you should never let the data that you do have dictate the content of the data visual display that you're building. Like, I have this data, so this is the data that I want to put on the dashboard. It should always be in the right balance. And when in doubt, you should always advocate for the user and their needs, and not the data itself. But as just said, often there is a lot of data, and the question then comes, how can we best use that data and utilize it to our advantage? Not just to support like the quote here by Andrew, but to really help you move further, to get those insights, to be able to optimize and to improve. So really try to understand what is it that I want to measure, what are my dimensions of that data, what is the hierarchy of the data model, and how can I best use metrics on top of the data. So absolutely, for this data step, for step 3, you most likely need other subject matter experts from those areas, so the people with specifically the data knowledge. So make sure to connect with everyone. This is also why at the start I mentioned it's a craft, because you need many of those skills together to actually make sure to create something that is not just meaningful, but immediately becomes insightful. And also think about data in context. So the context will support telling the data visual story. So don't add data that doesn't make sense. It will just distract the end user. Think about basically think about what are potentially all the other factors that will affect my objectives, because those are the data points that will make sense to then show within that same data visual display, within that same dashboard. They will help telling me the story, because then you added the data points and the context is there. I'll give an example on that. And it's totally unrelated to analytics or dashboard building, but it's a good example of how you would use maybe data in context and the decisions that you take from having that context. Personally, I love to travel, and let's say when I'm traveling and I'm planning a new trip, when I'm doing that, I would use the contextual data to find my best travel options. So of course, I want to make sure that it's the best trip possible. And to get that, I would add data as context, for example, weather reports to understand how the weather will be, or traffic data, or the distance and time to understand how easy I can get there, how long it will take. Are there maybe specific luggage requirements? Is it safe? How many do I need? All these factors, all these data points, they influence each other and enable you to make the best choice for getting from where you are right now into where you want to be. So in other words, from your current state to your objective. And I always like this quote. Albert Einstein said, data without context is just organized information. Step 4, organize. This step, organize, is really the first step where you actually start with plotting your display, with putting things on your dashboard. Here you actually start to build the UI. Again, that was what I mentioned at the start, that people often start wrong. They either not reach this part, they stop at 3, or they start over here. This in the right order. This is actually where you literally just start building the UI. You start building the visual display. You start building the report or the dashboard. It's based, of course, on all the information and all the analysis that you've done in the first 3 steps. So you know the audience, you know their needs, you know the specific type of the visual display that you want to build. You know that whole data structure. All those steps that we've seen before will now very much drive the way how you actually design and set the structure of your display. It will organize the dashboard to make it best consumable for your end users. On this one, if we look at, there are literally tons of best practices out there on the internet, how you should organize and structure those dashboards in order to really get that message across. I will highlight a strong set of them, all what I think are literally the best of the best practices, and those will have a huge impact while you are creating the dashboard. So first, let's look at hierarchy. One of the things that I always mention is you should never assume that all the information that you want to put on a dashboard is equally important. So your dashboard really needs some hierarchy. It needs some level of understanding how one thing fits to another. So if a dashboard has this solid hierarchy, it gives the end user also a way to structure the UI. So they structure the UI in their head, and it will absolutely result in better readability. So for example, the dashboard that you see here on the screen, the example, the top row with the scores, those should probably be your most important metrics. And the ones underneath could probably be the ones that then support end messaging. It's detailed information that's related to the scores above. Then second, the layout. One thing that we always mention is always try to stay consistent. So your users don't need to change their mental gears while they're actually consuming the UI. You should make it super simplistic and clean to again provide that structure for your end users. You should know that by average, I believe a user takes about or just 8 seconds to actually consume a page. Now, think about that if they already lost half of it with actually understanding the layout. So there's also the good reason the best dashboards out there, they actually follow a similar approach as what newspapers in the world of journalism do. They see this as this sort of inverted triangle with the most important information at the top and the more informative and more supporting insights always lower. And also on layout, ideally don't go beyond the first glance view. So really make it fit to one view, or make it visually clear that there's more below, but don't go too far below. Ideally, always keep it to a sort of best practice of, let's say, 5 to 7 widgets per view. Also, because of, remember, those 8 seconds that I was talking about before, that people actually take to fully consume a UI. And then there's consistency, meaning you should make your designs always through these fixed patterns. Dashboards just look better if they use this consistent layout. For example, if there's related information that literally belongs to one another, also group them together and use them within their own sort of proximity, and use similar layouts between groups and insights together. So visually, you can do that maybe through the use of containers around multiple insights or multiple analytics together. Next example, white space. The use of white space, or in this example, actually is more of a grayish space. It's proven to have this visual appeal to end users that are consuming your dashboards. It gives them this breathing space. So if you would remove all the available white space to just put more content in, it will probably overwhelm them with this cluttered view. Data overload, be aware of that. We talked about it before. If you're trying to add all the data that you think could be of interest to your end users, it will most likely pretty quickly turn into this very dense, cluttered view. Of course, this one is very much dictated by what you learned in one being the audience and their needs and who will visit and why, but also number two, the type of dashboards that you're building and the type of data information that fits to that. You can always create something like analytics data visualization that summarizes and use then drill downs to actually get the users to the detailed levels of that data. So in general, just don't overwhelm them. Humans are bad at keeping track of multiple things as one or multiple things at once. I'm absolutely one of them. So make sure to always keep it clean and simple and not too much on the data. And then third, if possible, use interactivity within your UIs, because they really allow the end user to basically play with the data visuals, with the charts, immediately leading to more engagement and a better understanding of the information that is under. So it really also allows people to look at the data information at different angles, or actually maybe immediately do an action on top of it. And then there's embedding. We very much believe in the power of embedding your data information. So ideally, if you have some analytics chart, embedding that analytics chart or the insights actually there where also your users are often. or maybe where they are the entire day. If you're able to do that, if you can put the embedded analytics there where your users work, it's literally the best thing that you can do. We talked about context. So whenever you put that analytics close to where they work, close to where the context is, the analytics itself, so consuming the data visuals, will really help in immediately understanding what's happening, but also enabling them to make that business decision or maybe taking some actions. Highlighting is mentioned. I think highlighting is a great way to bring focus within your reports, within your charts, within your dashboards, to really bring focus to that's what's important. For example, you can do it with highlighting a specific group column, or maybe some other part of the analytics that you want to have specific attention to. But always say highlighting is good, but don't overdo it. Too much highlighting might confuse your end users. So really apply it there where you maybe expect some trigger, some call to action for your end users. And then the last one, personalization. If you're able to use personalization within your dashboards, within your reports, it immediately creates that stickiness to the data visual displays. As you can see here on the example, a map, it's often the reason why maps work so amazingly well, because often the first thing, if you would consume a map report, is people will try to find themselves, like, how am I doing, or how's my team doing, or my department doing? Because it feels personal, it immediately drags the user into the analytics visual and keeps them there for further analysis. It really helps with that engagement. Something on grids, we say always try to use those grids to bring the structure that we talked about. It, of course, does not necessarily need to be this 3x3 structure, as long as there is this more fixed grid that brings that structure to the eye. I'm mentioning the F structure here. The F structure is a known thing. What we've seen from eye tracking studies. You can see, if you look at this example over here, you can see this as a sort of heat map. So you can see that most airtime actually goes to the upper left, and more or less the entire first row, a little bit of the second row, and maybe a part of the third row. Anything else will be less consumed, or maybe not consumed at all. It will really get limited attention. So think about that while you're building the grid, but also where you're placing. Also, this is a reason why you should most likely not build dashboards where you have to scroll a lot, because people might not even be aware that they can scroll, or people might not even be able to scroll, like again with the example of that TV screen on that service center. So really think about that to keep everything on the single glance, and really bring that grid structure, and think about where you place your specific information within the dashboard to really make sure that it gets the attention that it deserves. Of course, chart type selection. I will not go super deep on this one, because there's simply a lot of examples out there on the web. There are many of these like templates that you see over here that would help you to understand that once you know what your users need, the way how they look at the data, specifically from the data step, all the information you got here, to figure out what is the best sort of chart type that comes with that data set, what will bring my users probably to the best insight looking at that data. Always also think about the fact that don't force yourself to use something like a pie chart or a donut chart or a map just because they look good, or they might fit nicely in the remaining real estate. You should really, based on the point that you're trying to make and the questions that you want answered, you should be selecting the best chart that visualizes your data. And this as a last quote, around the organized step is perfection is not achieved, or is achieved when not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. So that what we're basically saying with this is try to always keep it as clean and as simple as can be, and less is definitely more. Okay, we made it into step 5, which is our final step, which is style. And with styling, you always do that finishing touch. Here you literally do the polishing. Here we make it pretty, but we always think about making it functionally pretty. So one of the elements that you of course have with style is coloring. Coloring is a great effective way to really grab the user's attention and guide them through your information. You can really use colors to put that focus and do that highlighting. The use of color right really lifts your data visual, like your dashboard, from being just functional into a super meaningful, easy to read data visual story. What we do say is always be careful. Don't overdo coloring, as you might sacrifice the bigger picture. Just as color grab the attention, it will also do that to maybe what you did not intend it to do if there's too much coloring within your dashboard. Another element that you should absolutely use is text. If the whole intent for your dashboard is to get that insight out of information, always think to just help the end user a bit by adding supporting text on how to read certain analytics and guide your users to the point that you are trying to make. Just make sure that with that you also stay consistent. So with the text that you're adding, maybe in or outside of analytics charts, again, it should not distract. And always, I mentioned also typography here. Keep a close eye on how to use the typography of charts. I think typography for any interface is already difficult, but for charting, this usually comes with an extra set of challenges because, of course, charts can be sometimes pretty small. Same can be said about labels and legends. So I would say use them where they really add value. And also here, pay attention to things like typography, font sizes, sizes in general, coloring. Again, also here, keep it consistent. Don't waste space on useless decorations that are unnecessary and will then just distract your end users. So I would also say if it doesn't add immediate value to the understanding, for example, especially when people can interact with the UI, it is also okay to leave labels and legends out because they will hover over and they will see it. But this is something that you would always check with the consumer. You check this with the audience. How will they interact with your view? This is actually the last one. So it brought me all the way at the end. We went through all the 5 steps, but there's actually this one more thing which actually applies to anything that we do in whether we're building dashboards, we're building products, software development, and that's feedback. So you can do all the right things and strictly follow the stages, identifying what's important to show and tell, but just don't expect it to be right and perfect from the start. It will absolutely evolve. So for this one, again, and it's actually a sort of continuous flow that you can do, go back to the audience, ask their feedback from the users, and really ask them what is helping them while they are consuming the dashboard, what's not helping them, and then fix. So iterate new versions until you really reach the point where your data visual display like a dashboard is best. This brings me to the end. Thank you very much for attending, and absolutely enjoy the rest of the day with all the amazing content that's on the program within the technical, the process, and the strategic streams. Maybe I see you later today in the session that I'm doing around value of analytics in the next experience platform. Or you can always check out that recording later.
Thanks again to Robert Jan for this great presentation. It'll be available shortly after the real-time event. Thank you all.